Thank you. Thank you, Aiden, very much for that nice introduction. I am here today to talk a little bit about the history of denim. Denim, of course, holds many different histories and likely many futures. So it's highly ubiquitous as a material, and yet somehow it stands for individuation. So we're here to look at, why this cotton fabric pant endures after all of this time. And why is it that garments created out of denim are sometimes viewed as countercultural or casual? It doesn't take any less time to make a pair of denim pants than a non-denim pair of pants, and yet we look at it as kind of a casual garment. So what are some of the things that lead to that situation? And I'm going to start with a quote from a scholar looking at social semiotics and dress. The ability of denim to invest the body with a little bit of history is inseparable from its career as an eminently useful artifact, a career crowned by its delivery of the natural everyday body as a culturally disavowing, politically empowered body. So I think, the denim is useful, it's considered practical, and the idea that it covers an everyday body is really critical to our understanding of what denim is and how we read into it. There are many who kind of are involved in the widespread adoption of denim jeans, and these narratives converge and spread out over time. So before we go into the social history of that, we're going to look a little bit at the basic functionality of the object and what is a pair of denim jeans or denim pants. Although it might seem simple, legitimate denim jeans are different than like this pair of sweatpant jeans that are digitally printed to look like denim jeans, right? That would not be considered denim jeans. So there's an authenticity to it. Denim is typically considered to be a cotton warp face twill weave. For those of you who don't know, the warp go up and down in the loom and the weft go across. And the warp traditionally were dyed indigo, where the weft was left undyed or bleached. So that's why when you turn up the cuff of a jean, you see that it looks much lighter because the floats on the front are the indigo dyed portion. And I don't know if they did that to save efficiency and money, or if indigo is a very fugitive dye. So it could be also that there was a lot of spread onto skin. But twills, which is what this weave is, have that slight diagonal. Twills are really pliable and they have good wrinkle recovery, but they're not so strong. They're not as strong as a plain weave, and cotton is incredibly absorptive and has poor resilience. So if any of you have ever fallen into a lake with a pair of jeans on, you know they get really heavy because they absorb water. During the past 30, 40 years, spandex been introduced into jeans, which improves their resilience a little bit. So accounts of denim fabric history often concur on the theory that the word denim is derivative of a fabric created in Nimes, France, called serge denim. And that's been in production since the 16th century. However, this was a durable wool fabric, not denim like we know today. And common lore indicates that the general concept of a rugged utilitarian fabric became shortened from serge denim to denim in English-speaking countries. So Levi Strauss's company is almost always cited as pivotal in popularizing denim jeans in the US. And his San Francisco-based dry goods store was instrumental in distributing this concept of denim jeans. I'm sure similar pants were made prior to this, but he was really instrumental in their commercialization. Strauss was a German immigrant, and he moved to San Francisco in 1853 to start a dry goods business, really focused on selling material to gold miners during the gold rush. He was not the sole creator of Levi's. A tailor named Jacob Davis was working near Reno and had been making work pants from materials sourced through Strauss's company. Now, Strauss sourced most of his cotton from New Hampshire, where his extended family worked. So it's this, of course, big, link of different resources. Now, Davis devised the rivet connections that Levi's are synonymous with to prevent tearing, and his pants became very popular with farmers and ranchers, but he couldn't keep up with demand. So he reached out to Strauss to increase production. And Davis actually has the patent for these rivet connections. You can see a quote from the patent there from 1872 talking about how they prevent rip at stress points. The look of denim jeans is really in the details. So they use a lot of lapped seams, a lot of top stitching, a lot of contrast stitching. This is really what begins to become the aesthetic of denim jeans. And if any of you are wearing jeans today, you'll often note that the interior seam along the inside of the leg is more reinforced than the exterior seam, because obviously there's more abrasion along that interior seam. So you'll often see like a flat felled seam or something like that. And notice in the ad here from 1873 that they're marketing that copper rivet, that's a really successful design detail. Keep in mind that the prevailing fashion at this time is fairly formal. Menswear was often made up of many layers of wool, like we can see here on these images at the right. So denim work pants, this was a really new kind of innovative thing. Now here's a page from a Sears Roebuck catalog from 1908. So this is almost 30 years after Strauss and Davis were issuing the first Levi's. But you can see that other people are building off of this kind of success and building similar kinds of garments with contrast top stitching. I looked up in the inflation calculator what 55 cents would have been today, and it's around $20. So these were fairly affordable pants. Now, coveralls and overalls have been used in farming prior to denim jeans. And in the early 20th century, overalls were increasingly made with denim fabric, and they were made for all ages. So here you see, men and children in denim jeans. Photographs of sharecroppers and tenant farmers often show men and boys in denim overalls. They were widely available, durable detailing, easy to take care of. And you'll notice that women are still largely in skirts of some kind at this time. Here is a pair of children's overalls from our collection from a manufacturer called Cowden, which was in Kentucky. And it was sold at outlets like JCPenney's. So you can see there are very different pockets and places to hook tools into. And just, these are at a retailer like JCPenney, which was widely affordable, but denim jeans at this time were widely affordable. It's not like you had the luxury brands of denim jeans. They were sold because they were an affordable item. Here's an adult pair of overalls by Big Mac, which was also a JCPenney brand. And you can see that they have, I always like to say to students, real live rips and tears in them. So there's, stitching where they're trying to mend and extend the useful life of this object. You'll also note that there's red kind of stitching at the stress points instead of copper rivets. Not everybody used that technology. Of course, initially it was proprietary, but also it would have increased time to make the garment. And in war times, that kind of material just might not have been available for something like a fashion item, even though they were useful. So while 19th century popular culture in the US was, pretty obsessed with class division and its physical embodiment in the clothes that people wore, during the early 20th century, there's a bit more regional pride in being more rural. Of course, this is not unilateral, but at least self-referentially within that sphere. So here we can see First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt visiting Virginia, and she's listening to local musicians who are wearing denim overalls almost as a kind of costume or uniform. In Hollywood films and their talent made efforts to glamorize denim jeans early on. While the acceptance of women in pants took decades, The privileges afforded to actresses did allow for play in this area. So here is Katharine Hepburn matching jeans with a mink coat. And then Ruby Keeler and Clara Bow were actresses dressed in overalls there. So photographers and stylists clearly wanted women to look provocative and sexy in denim. Movies were kind of novel at this time. Certainly they've been around by 1939. But talking pictures really were only available in the 20s, and it was a somewhat affordable kind of entertainment. Westerns were a very popular film genre, featuring sweeping landscapes of the American Southwest. And you can imagine, for people who had never been there, to see some of these images projected on a large screen would have been really impactful. These films, of course, were very romanticized and were very problematic in promoting harmful stereotypes that were consistently integrated into narratives, especially related to Indigenous people and probably women in general. John Wayne is a well-known Hollywood actor, or was, and he starred in Stagecoach and was featured wearing denim jeans. Images of cowboys and ranchers in general served to connect denim with a commercially produced idea of what it meant to be masculine and what it meant to be intrinsically American. So given that this movie was set in the 1880s, this pair of denim jeans would not have even been available then. So they're already kind of retroactively creating this lore. Hollywood's focus on the West stimulated a tourist industry that provided opportunities for those in northern climates to experience ranch life in the US West. The clientele was largely white and upper class, and some of the Western dude ranch vacation venues were actually in the Northeast United States. Part of their allure was tied to these relaxed clothing standards. So it was socially acceptable here for women to dress in jeans, and men, whereas typically that was not, that look was kind of more guarded in your average life. You can see I pulled this article from 1940 where it says that, guests are made at home in a flannel shirt and tight-fitting blue denim jeans. So this is really beginning to eke into fashion at this point. And vacation in general always held different rules around garments. If you think about coastal areas where people walk around in swimsuits, there's different social mores related to vacationing. During World War II, a large percentage of men enlisted or were drafted into the armed services, and women were encouraged to step into jobs that were typically held by men. Many of these were in manufacturing, directly related to wartime production. And denim jeans were worn out of practicality. My guess is a lot of these were that were actually worn were cut for men, and they were not specialized for women. Their use was kind of normalized through these very appealing images. These are all, images produced by the government. So they had these beautifully coiffed women, in their denim jeans and looking lovely. Whereas the reality of that work, of course, was really gritty and dirty. During the post-war years, fashion magazines like Vogue occasionally featured wealthy society women in denim jeans. I found this spread on somebody named Mrs. Fields. Of course, they didn't refer to her first name, of Washington, D.C. Most of this article discusses her elegant gowns by Schiaparelli and Mainbacher, but it does kind of show us this supposedly more relatable situation of her in her backyard wearing denim jeans with her little girl. Despite increased use, denim had negative associations. Jeans were seen as casual, and they were seen as representing a carelessness about appearance. And they were also associated with manual labor, which was off-putting to some people. So this 1950 cartoon from the New York Times illustrates dozens of children at a playground in Western-themed ensembles. And the article kind of sarcastically says that today's child considers himself practically nude if he doesn't have on his roll-bottom denims. So denim's not only associated with manual labor, but declining morals as well. Two popular movies from the 50s, Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean, and The Wild One with Marlon Brando, focused on public perception and morality. And in both films, the main characters are appealing in their kind of angst and disenfranchisement. And both are shown wearing denim. So clearly, it's not that denim was new in the 50s or that it was even newly accepted as fashion, but denim jeans are kind of situated here as countercultural. It was really dependent on how they were styled and, frankly, who was wearing it. So this context and look of denim is really important. You can't really separate how it's worn from the person that's wearing it. So here's another quote. I won't read the whole thing, but there's this history that tells a classical story of mystification of the laboring body. And so there's this mythology that transforms this object in something that embodies the story of American nation. It's really talking about denim as inseparable from its function as work clothes and in its complexity and how we read it. Here's a class photo, which trousers. The girls, of course, are not countercultural. They're just not allowed to wear pants at this time. But I do think that this extends that mythology that women and girls are somehow more disenfranchised or more separate from the land and hard labor than boys. Much of the denim marketed to women during the 50s still is looking at it as work clothes. But Levi's, of course, sees, why should we not be catering to half the population? We could be making a lot more money here. So they really start to promote this idea of jeans for women. Here's Lady Levi's, for example. And note that ad copy that it still is calling it the original Western blue jean. The print ads here are certainly focused on a more suburban white idea of denim through these kind of patio situations. Here on the left, you see an image from Ball State University, their handbook, along with text instructing new students, both fellows and girls, to bring denim jeans with them to college. They, of course, couldn't be worn during class, but were worn for sports, lounging, and studying. And I was just curious what kind of sales were like in the 50s for denim jeans. And a 1956 New York Times article reported that 3 million pairs of denim jeans were being worn on college campuses at this time. And students in 33 colleges were surveyed about denim use, and it was found that 50% of them owned 3 or more pair. So they really were pretty ubiquitous at this time. In England, on the right there, you see an image of the Teddy Gals, which was a play on the Teddy Boys, kind of this return to Edwardian dress. But they're pairing denim jeans with blazers and blouses, which we might not think looks that controversial. But at the time, this was a very different way of presenting oneself and what they would term more androgynous dress. Popular culture continued to reinforce early concepts of denim in post-war America. So To Kill a Mockingbird, for example, was set in the 30s, but issued in 1962, and uses kind of existing tropes of farming and discontent when costuming characters in denim. It kind of underlines the notion that denim jeans are associated not only with manual labor, but with marginalized people. And certainly racial marginalization, but also, children have very little agency. And farmers and rural people are also seen as often having less agency than their counterpart here, who is Gregory Peck, dressed in the suit. Media culture had continuing interest in Westerns. linking denim with fictional cowboys and concepts around rugged individualism. Of course, that individualism, is acceptable at a mainstream level. Denim's association with rebellion grew during the 60s and 70s, coinciding with the highly organized civil rights movement. Respectability politics had been a popular approach for gaining support, and influential organizations like the NAACP promoted the idea that being taken seriously on the national stage meant dressing up. In 1965, an NAACP representative went to the front of a meeting and said, we don't want any girls in denim jeans, we don't want any boys in beards. But this was not a universally held belief or strategy. Andrew Young was a politician who was also the first Black American to be appointed as the United States ambassador to the United Nations in 1977. And he was a prominent civil rights activist and had close ties with Martin Luther King. He felt that wearing the clothing of sharecroppers made a more authentic statement of unity than dressing in a way that appealed to kind of that white upper class culture. And he was not alone. Doris, or Dory, and Joyce Ladner were activists and key organizers in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which they called SNCC, and they adopted denim as a uniform, breaking from the suits and skirts worn by members of other national rights organizations. Not only did they do this to align themselves with working class Americans, but they also used denim overalls to desexualize the female body. Tanisha Ford, who does a lot of scholarship in this area, says, by adapting Black farm workers' bodies through the wearing of denim, SNCC believed it was reestablishing a soul tie to the rural Black community. The SNCC women, many of whom were college educated, consciously chose to wear denim to expose problematics of such class stereotypes related to dress and the body. This approach did not resonate with all farmers and manual laborers. Some felt it was performative and disrespectful to people who had no choice but to wear overalls. But regardless, there was growing interest in denim as a countercultural fabric and garment. And obviously, there was no one way to present oneself in activism. I just pulled these two pictures. I thought it was interesting that, both of these were in fairly mainstream publications. And you can see how differently kind of that racial equity was envisioned by mass media. In 1946, there's this beautiful, article in Life magazine that shows all of these portraits of students and faculty at Howard University, obviously not in denim. And then this other photograph is from Columbia University with these men linked arm in arm, looking for more access to doctorate programs at Columbia. And you can see the men at Columbia are wearing, some of them do have denim on, but we start to see that wearing denim it can be different, right? This is a very fashionable kind of chic version of wearing denim that we see here. So the 60s and 70s saw many groups of people fighting for equality. The civil rights movement had really paved the way for movements like women's rights, gay liberation, and anti-Vietnam War protests. And activists often protested impractical and quote-unquote anti-fashion clothing. Also instrumental in leveraging fashion during this time for the women's movement were lesbian feminists. And they were self-described, some of them as radical lesbians, and used fashion as a form of protest and self-expression. So the styles of lesbian feminists during this era were intentionally anti-consumeristic and defied the current cultural norms. So this is Andrea Dworkin, who was a very noted feminist author, scholar, and completely avoided conventional beauty as a way to counter the objectification of women. Lesbian women also frequently wore pants and are sometimes credited with normalizing this as a fashionable garment for women everywhere, regardless of sexuality. It should be noticed that the National Organization of Women at that time, and notably their first president, Betty Friedan, felt that the alternative styles of lesbian women were a threat to the success of the ERA, and it took a long time for them to be inclusive of the lesbian feminist movement in the overall women's movement. So in the late 60s, denim jeans were now occasionally featured in magazines as fashionable mainstream garments. Here they are in Vogue. And you can see this varies considerably from any kind of countercultural look and builds on like this kind of sanitized version of cowboy chic. And the style and construction lines associated with denim begin to kind of infiltrate into non-denim garments. So the skirt and the overcoats are not denim, but they're kind of stitched in that aesthetic. And then other brands like Wrangler really begin to experiment with color. And Wrangler also experimented with adding a lot of stretchy fabric into their denim and making it a blend so it fit tighter. And you can see here on this Wrangler ad how it's really emphasizing the way and sexualizing the way the denim jeans fit around the hips and rear, which becomes increasingly the focus of ad campaigns throughout the 20th century. It's not as this has never been done before, right? I mean, women have always been, objectified in that way. But now we see this more and more commonly for both men and women. And people experimented with denim in a lot of different applications. So, it's not the best fabric for swimwear, but we see people, these are more sunsuits, let's say, kind of adding that aesthetic back into to swimwear. By the 1970s, denim jeans had almost kind of this characterized association with rebellion youth and American culture. A burgeoning media culture that surrounded things like Vietnam War protests and things like Woodstock. I mean, these were very influential in spreading this ideal. And even though media culture and media coverage have been around for decades, that just picks up and increases over time and continues to today. So denim upcycling, as we now call it, it used to be, something else. And the DIY movement in general became almost, integrated directly with style. So here's a skirt that's been upcycled from a pair of Levi's from our collection. And you can see that pockets from other pairs of jeans have been integrated into this as ornamentation. And here is a more orchestrated kind of total DIY ensemble with an upcycled skirt, a denim hat, and a tie-dye shirt. And you can see, again, this kind of skirt, maybe some of you have made these, where you rip out the interior seam and then infill it with other denim to create kind of that gore down the center for fullness. This patchwork blazer was purchased from a small boutique in New York City, but it's clearly made to look unfinished and in alignment with kind of a countercultural appearance. I think it's interesting that the buttons on the front have been repurposed from waistbands from other pairs of jeans. And ornamenting denim was popular and promoted by companies like Levi's in the 1970s, with varying levels, of course, of sophistication. So here's a beaded version from our collection, which is quite pretty. And then, like a lot of styles, this becomes absorbed by higher-end designers and sold back at higher price points. So this quote-unquote hippie skirt is really meant to be sold to in a more affluent sector of the economy. Denim jeans go hand in hand with rock music in the 70s, especially. So here is rock legend Jimi Hendrix wearing jeans and a military-style jacket. And then Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols wearing jeans with a motorcycle jacket. So there's many styles that are available within a relatively short span of time. And I always like this comparison. I think it's so interesting. Marvin Gaye was a very prominent musician who signed with the Motown label. And that label was started by entrepreneur Barry Gordy, who really strongly believed in glamour and luxe and used that to kind of control his artists, and really didn't want them dressing casually. He kept very tight control. But eventually, he could not control the tide of increasing demand for people to kind of express themselves through dress. And Marvin Gaye, who was one of their more, bigger buck artists, was able at some point to kind of dress the way that he wanted to. But, both these pictures are from the very same era. It's interesting. And then, of course, there were total denim outfits. And this is a men's suit. In the 70s especially, there was a lot of experimentation with men's dress and ways to kind of move it beyond the typical. This to me is kind of a variation on a leisure suit. But rock bands of the 70s had also made this transition from the kind of implied sexuality of the 50s and 60s to something much more blatant. And much more mainstream from bands like the Rolling Stones, Iggy Pop, and the Doors. So American and British bands often wore jeans during performances and publicity junkets. And high-profile celebrities were more frequently seen in denim. Everyone from First Lady Jackie Kennedy, of course, she wasn't First Lady at this time, but there she is down in the center, to people like Diana Ross. And here you can see Diana Ross at Studio 54 pairing stiletto heels with her denim. A 1976 Harper's Bazaar fashion spread that focused on jeans notes that you can wear it for day or evening, which is kind of interesting that now it's a going out kind of thing. And this back pocket becomes kind of ground zero for branding. That is just really amplified at this time. Well, some high-end designers like Yves Saint Laurent say they're never going to design in denim. Others make a name for themselves by doing so. So a pair of Calvin Klein jeans sold, 40 to 50 years ago, retailed for about $44, which is about $215 by today's standards. So now some jeans are becoming, pretty unaffordable for people. And then, I did look up, though, that jeans from Sears and Montgomery Wards at this time were still selling for $15 to $20. So this is a print version on the right of a television ad campaign featuring then 15-year-old Brooke Shields, who said that nothing came between her and her Calvins. And it was this kind of controversy because it was such a sexually charged television ad with a minor. And although liberated sexuality had been associated with denim, this drew blatant relationships between youth, sexuality, and denim jeans. During the 80s, denim took on new shapes and styles. Acid washing, pinstriping, and stone washes were marketed. Sometimes one item held many of these same things. And branding became increasingly competitive. So you had a lot of new labels like Guess, Girbaud, Forenza, Chic, and Lee jeans, which were a lower price point as well. Vogue featured denim ensembles that had typical 80s detailing, like, asymmetrical closures, gold zippers. And the copy on the Harper's Bazaar says that, this Parisian designer made their own version of the all-American favorite denim. So really associated with American culture. And at the time in the 80s, I even remember that there were rumors that if you traveled abroad, people would offer to buy your denim jeans off of you for like high amounts of money because they were so coveted. So here's an example from our collection of a design by Italian designer Alberto Ferretti. And you can see that, people are beginning to really play with what it means to be denim. This is a screen printed, essentially denim jacket with highly articulated details, and it's finished with like a velvet trim. And here is a Chanel kind of oversized hot pink neon jacket or coat. And something like this obviously would have been expensive and is trying to really make luxury out of denim. Notice that this too is probably a piece-dyed garment. And as time went on, I'm sure a lot of the jeans that you all own are piece-dyed, or at least the fabric is dyed, put into a dye vat versus that weave of indigo and then undyed weft. So denim continued to be part of the popular music scene, a lot of different genres. Hip hop music was very influential in denim fashion. Here's an image of Run DMC, and look at how crisp the tennis shoes are and those lines are. It's a very tidy kind of appearance. And at the same time, we're seeing artists like Madonna wear that ripped or shredded jean. In the 90s, the popularity of grunge rose, and it really rejected the glam rock of the 80s and instead focused on kind of disillusionment. And stylistically, tattered clothing was taking off, prompting designers to pre-shred, pre-rip, pre-patch denim jeans. This denim look of wearing jeans low and showing off your boxers had widespread popularity with men beginning in the 90s and extending into the 2000s. Hip hop and rap artists like LL Cool J helped popularize this fashion trend, inspired by street style. But as with hippie styles from the 70s, you had designers like Calvin Klein take this look and then, of course, resell it. Recurring interest in overalls as a fashionable style, went on and on. So here there are clear associations between overalls and physical labor. And TLC at the left, you can see, has a much more kind of desexualized version of overalls that they're wearing, whereas Destiny's Child on the right has a more sexualized version, I would say. But they were brand ambassadors for Tommy Hilfiger, so I'm sure they're wearing this as that company instructed. And this also does align with, the politics of third and fourth wave feminism, where sexuality is seen as agential versus objectifying. So there's a lot of shifting going on here in public perception between, people have their own opinions on that, but, and then I don't even know what to say about NSYNC there. That's so ridiculous. So companies like Crown Holder and FUBU created exclusive denim looks that were highly sought after by youth and adults with a strong focus on hip hop culture. The clothing was, according to their marketing, was meant to make the wearers feel like royalty on the streets. And they really ratcheted up that branding and graphics with ornamentation that now spills further away from the pocket and really embodies the whole pair of denim. While denim has been used on the red carpet or for high-profile events, we kind of largely understand it to be counter to the typical glam of evening events. And here's some examples of red carpet. And singers and popular culture figures with significant social status wear denim with intent. We probably all do. That is, denim is not something that they just throw on to be comfortable. Instead, jeans are high-ticket items that are selected for their stylistic properties. We are very aware, looking at this, that Beyonce and Rihanna's ensembles, that they didn't wear through those jeans, that they purchased those to look like that. I think this is so interesting. I know it's from 2010, but at that time, the Olympic uniforms for snowboarding were made to look like worn-out jeans. Obviously, worn-out jeans would be terrible for snowboarding, so the illusion here is really pretty impressive. But it kind of re-solidifies denim as intrinsically American. This was a picture I took a while ago, actually. I was looking at a pair of 1935 jeans from our collection with a pair of my jeans, and just the difference in construction and fit over time. So, there's such a difference in how jeans fit and the options available. I pulled this little screen from Gap jeans too, that you can, buy the rise in low slung, mid, and high. And probably still people think they can't. I'm one of them, can't think they, can find what they want. And all of this focus on ripped and torn jeans, that takes effort and time. That's not magic. So to get denim to look like that takes a lot of manipulation. So here you see, people industrially ironing in those pleats or using a Dremel tool to relax the denim. Here too is another diesel ad next to a couple images of denim being manipulated to look worn. And, it's so interesting that we want to wear jeans that look worn, and I'm not trying to convince people not to. It's just, it's curious. And so I liked this quote that the artificial weathering of jeans is engineered to evoke not simply a history of personal use, but history itself through the citation of denim styles and textures from specific periods in the historical past. So trying to evoke something that's not even necessarily part of our personal history through what we're wearing. I thought this was interesting when I was looking up the brand for those little pair of overalls. I found this ad for these, vintage Cowden overalls. And they're really, these have what appears to be actual wear, and they're marketing it. So, it's hard to come across standard items that have been so realistically aged. And it calls it an edgy appearance. So I think, how these, what does it mean to wear something that's marked by the work of others? Indigo dyed denim is also applied to fashion items like high-end shoes. Here's a couple of pair of Christian Louboutins that would be very expensive. These retail for around $1,000. And today we see denim coming down fashion runways carrying very large price tags. I grabbed these from Paris Fashion Week, despite the fact that they still have casual undertones. I think denim continues to evolve in its meaning. Denim Day is done every year, and it's observed by a lot of universities, including the University of Minnesota. And it began in Italy in 1999 after a female student was raped by a driving instructor. And the instructor was convicted, but the sentence was overturned because they ruled that she wore her jeans tight and would have had to help take them off. So now there's this National Denim Day. Now that was not an original kind of intent with denim jeans, but it starts to gain new meaning over time. And so, denim as a fabric, I think we always read as something useful. Maybe that will change. It certainly has less potency now than it did probably 40 years ago in terms of being a countercultural object. But I think it has an interesting artifact history. Thank you.